So now it is my pleasure to introduce to you all Jerry Bostelman. Jerry, I have to say, is the only person I have seen brag in his bio about being fired. The irony is that he actually fired himself, he said. He is the founder of Vaco, which is a national search firm specializing in everything from accounting and finance to general staffing. He founded this company and eventually turned over many of those specialty positions within his firm to people whom he hired, and brags about firing himself from those roles. You will see in a moment how energetic he is, and it's no surprise that he was awarded the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year Award in 2007. And his company has been on the Inc. 5000 every year that it has been eligible. So I'd like to welcome Jerry up to the podium. Thank you.
After following Sam, I wish I knew a lot more famous people. So I'm just going to sub famous names in for people I'm going to talk about throughout the conversation. Thank you, guys. I'd like to say, to start off with, hotty toddy. And as a University of Tennessee grad, I'm not above going for the cheap applause. So you can see that. Actually, I share a lot of similarities with some of the speakers that have spoken so far. I, too, went to University of Tennessee. I squeezed my 4-year degree into 5. I like to say I was waiting out the recession, but I don't know that that's 100% true. And finally, a big mystery was resolved today. I know what happened to my Puerto Rican girlfriend in college. I see how this goes. I'm watching you. I'd also like to say I'm totally a big fan of relationships as well. In fact, FedEx, Fred's, and FNC are all clients of Vaco, so I love the network, and we're willing to serve everybody in the room. So we'll talk about that later at some point. We're going to go through a few that I started Vaco back in 2002. And I'd worked at all big companies prior to that, so as a sole individual, went out and raised money. And I'm going to talk about one of my investors later, Lucius Birch, who's an old Southern gentleman. And he was referred to me by some of my clients that had taken money from him. So when I went to meet with Lucius, the trade centers had just been hit. It was 2001 when I was raising money, and he said, "Son," he smoked a pipe, "you could not be raising money in a more disadvantageous climate." So talk a little bit about that. Today, I'm going to go through the top 10 lessons learned at Vaco, or 10 of the lessons. To level set expectations, they say a good presentation is when you take away one nugget that you can use. I'm actually going to shoot for one nugget per table. So if I can get that, that's a win. Starting off with number 1, and I'm going to use my BlackBerry because that's where my notes are. I promise I'm not texting anybody. I'm talking to you guys eyeball to eyeball. Pull it up here. The first one is more of a question. Which do you think is riskier, being an entrepreneur or being part of a mega conglomerate? Raise your hand if you think being an entrepreneur is riskier than being part of a large organization. It's debatable, and I'll let you guys make your own decision on this. So since Vaco started, we've served 5,000 unique clients over the course of the last 10 years in 29 offices across the U.S. And give you a little background, Vaco provides CFOs, controllers on a project to permanent basis. We also do technology on a project to permanent basis and do staffing in 29 different LLCs across the nation. And each LLC the local ownership is 30%. So actually it's 29 partnerships across the country, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. I think with 5,000 clients, how many could I lose and still have a job? I mean, if I got 2,500, that's half. I'd still have a gig. 1,250 probably. Maybe I could probably get by with when I was with a mega conglomerate with 20 clients. So not that we ever want to lose a client, and we almost never do. I think you could argue that my breadth of security is stronger with 5,000 clients. If I'm in a mega conglomerate, guess who makes the decision whether I keep the job or not? Maybe my boss. Maybe my boss's boss, who probably likes me because I think I've got a decent personality too. Maybe my boss's boss, because I probably play golf with him at some point. Or maybe my boss's 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 boss, who looks at me as employee number 674328857 and doesn't give a damn about my personality. So I would argue that there is a chance that if you're using somebody else's money, being an entrepreneur is a little less risky. Number 2, who's ever heard of a firm called Arthur Andersen? Well, that's good. Actually, this is My only real story that has to do with Hollywood, which I'll tell later, was I was talking to some MBA students that came into my office to do a project, and I said, and I'd be in 2 different locations at the same time. And I said, hey guys, I hate to jack tripper you, but I've got to go to one office and then I've got to go to another one. And they looked at me just like you. Raise your hand if you know who Jack Tripper is. That's a generational issue. It was a big hit called Three's Company back in the day, so I'm glad that some of you still remember Arthur Anderson. That's where I started my career. It was Big 6 at the time, and now it's Big 4 public accounting. Well, when I left there, I would recruit people out of the Big 4 firms. I'd have a great entrepreneurial opportunity for a CPA, great chance to be a CFO of a startup, great chance to go for it. What do you think that they would tell me half the time? You know, man, that's exciting. It looks really, really cool. But I work at Arthur Anderson, and nothing's ever going to happen to Arthur Anderson. Arthur Anderson was the biggest accounting firm ever until they had a bit of an issue with a little company called Enron. Does anybody remember that? Enron ultimately took Arthur Anderson down, and lots of people who spent 20 years at the same company that had never looked for a job and never networked before found themselves on the street looking for something else. So in 2012, I would challenge there's no such thing as a permanent job, so we all need to think from an entrepreneur's perspective. And I worked at Arthur Anderson, so I want to clarify, we were found innocent. Sorry about the way your firm went down like that, but we were ultimately found innocent. The second point from an entrepreneurial perspective is it matters a lot where you get the money. And that's why I was asking Sam about experiences that he's had in terms of deals going bad. It matters so much. And I'll tell a few stories. I told a little bit about Lucius Birch, who is one of my key benefactors. I'll tell you a few stories that didn't work out. Our first acquisition was in Houston, Texas. They had a great business. They've been around for 10 years. They did about $14 million in revenues. And because of the deals, 2 deals that they had done, one with their investors and one with their employees in a disadvantageous comp plan, after 12 years of runaway success, the 2 founders were about to go bankrupt. The guys had made a deal with an investor who'd done a lot of deals before that, I try not to get too technical, you guys probably understand it better than I do as MBA students though. He took 50% of the company on a guarantee. And then he had a 12% coupon, which meant that he had to get paid his 12%. Well, guess what? It all comes back to this, I guess. Guess what their biggest client was in 2002? Houston, Texas. Enron. Darn you guys! So when Enron went down, it negatively impacted their firm for years, and they still had an accumulating 12% coupon they had to pay their investors. So that's a hole that gets very difficult. Secondly, they made a bad deal with their players where they're giving out too much in compensation. Well, we were able to go in there and talk to the investor who was not bending not one iota. At this point, he was owed something like, I don't know, $1.9 million on a firm that they just didn't monetize. We couldn't do the deal. So we talked to him about a few risk points that he had that he wasn't aware of, and we ended up getting him out at the original deal. They've been with Vaco for a year, and they're going to pull about $900,000 in net income this year. All because we were able to go in and renegotiate the dollars and get an investor out of the way. Had those guys been able to work it out amongst themselves, they would have had a great firm and been able to grow, but not at the same pace they're going to grow with Vaco. I want that clarified. Another one is a restaurant that I invested in. Great story. I opened in 2009, right? 2009 was probably the worst time to open anything. These guys have built a $20 million company out of 6 restaurants in Nashville, Tennessee. Runaway success. I'm a small investor in it. I've already got all my money back, as have all the other investors. So I'm in a meeting last week with these guys. They want to take this thing, they've got 3 replicable concepts, which is what you really want in a restaurant business. They've got 3 that they could take national. Well, I'm in a meeting with the investors and with the operators. After the meeting, which went pretty well, the investors pull me aside and say, this guy can't run a business. I mean, I don't know what he's doing all day. I've given him some specific advice. His staff's unhappy. Nobody's happy. I mean, we got real problems here. I was like, you're checking your pocket like mine because I've got all my money back. I think it's going great. $20 million started in 2009 is a ridiculous return, but these guys had a little too much time on their hands, and they wanted to meddle in all the details of it. After that, I walk out, my the operator, who I like, grabs me and says, got a minute? These investors are killing me. I can't get any work done. We're filling these things back. We're posting gaudy numbers. I want to work another deal where we can give up what we have and just franchise it on a go-forward basis and build this thing out. So these guys, every single person in that room is working as hard as they can to kill something that's an absolute no-brainer. I'm going to work with them a little bit to see if we can come to agreement on how we're going to build that, but that's a great example of taking money from somebody who, it's one thing to, when things go bad, to have to deal with issues, but when things are going good, let's just get out of the way and find a way to build it. We all have to be humble and coachable. So I'll contrast that with my investor, Lucius, who when I first met with Lucius, I told you about the initial conversation. Crom's in the room, Lucius is in the room. I need $500,000, it's 2001, and Crom's another investor. Lucius smoking his pipe. I'd lay down. We'd already done the same exact thing in a big corporation, so I felt like we'd give up 17.5% of the company for the business. Lucius has done HCA, Kentucky Fried Chicken, some monster deals. Lucius fires up his pipe. Looks up, pipe, I said. That was a little flashback, which I want to emphasize the word allegedly. I said pipe. So Lucius starts burning one, and he fires up his pipe, and he looks over at Crom and says, let me see if I understand the mechanics of this deal. Crom, we put up virtually all the money, scratch that, all the money. These boys take themselves a generous salary, and they benevolently offered us 17.5% of the company. Crom, is there something wrong with my math? Let me tell you, this usually works, son. I get 80% of the company, and if you play lights out, there's an outside chance you can earn your way back to 45% of the company. There's a delta between what you want and what I'm willing to provide. So that was my first experience with private equity, to which I said, hey, look, this is my first deal. It's like when I bought my wife's diamond. She said, jeweler said I was getting a good deal. I didn't know if it was or not. Excuse this line, but he started it. My investor said, it ain't going to be all complicated. I ain't going to ask you to put your wife's panties up as collateral. But it means to be a damn sight fairer than 17.5% of the company. So Crom actually renegotiated, we ended up negotiating 30% to those guys, and we hit a lot of difficult times along the way. And he's been, in addition to being an amazing investor, he's ridiculously quotable. So it's been a great experience from the go. And this is a conversation, not a presentation, so if you see something along the line you want to comment, say the word. This leads me to the second portion. Number 4. And again, this is when being in an entrepreneurial environment, it's increasingly important to recognize that you're not really free to do what you want to do. You work for everybody at that point. You've got investors who've got to please. Now we've got, originally it was just me, and when we first started, I just had to take care of that, had to sell, be a player coach, et cetera. But we built our mantra on a new economy, which is, Vaco means free yourself from a master. We're looking for that talented malcontent, that individual that's slaving away at a corporate bureaucracy that's not able to find success, that wants to do something entrepreneurial. So as a result of that, we bring everybody in and give them equity in their local groups. And so the promise there is, if you come to Vaco, you're going to be part of the entrepreneurial ride. So you're going to have a lot of freedom. Nobody's going to look over your shoulder and make sure things are done. But with that freedom comes responsibility that we need to work harder than any manager could ever drive us to work. So that's the mentality of it. So you come at, and that's allowed us to attract a lot of players. So what we say at Vaco is, again, not to use, I'm a B, not your boss, right? So at the end of the day, we serve the rainmakers. And that's something that's, I think, is a no-brainer, but it's ridiculous how often that corporations get to the point where you're serving your manager and not your client, candidate, and consultant. So we really work hard to create that servant leadership environment, and as a result of that, we've lost 3 players over the course of the last 10 years to competitors, and we've taken about 100 from competitors. We've had a lot more turnover than that, but they're at least average producers. 3 people that we wanted to keep ended up going to competitors. I have this right here. I'm going to pull this up. Take a minute. Have a coffee. Talk amongst yourselves. Pull this right back up. Shan't be long now. The third point is, being an entrepreneur is gritty. It's just gritty, gritty, gritty business. These guys gave me the money, But I just left a big corporation, right? I had people that did my faxes. I had to learn to do copiers. I remember I needed to copy something. I got a great deal. I need to copy it, get it done. Who's going to do that? Oh, I guess that's me, right? And I can remember one day I had sold all morning, recruited for my job all afternoon, and then written my website from about 7 to 11 because it's amazing how much you've just got to get the information out there. And then from 11 to 1, I printed invoices to send these things out. And they came out upside down. So 1 in the morning on my letterhead, I said, forget it, I'm sending them. So bam! Send out all my invoices, right? People still give me a hard time about that today. I'm like, yeah, I fired that guy. And I kind of did, right? I'm not doing that. I've got qualified people in there taking care of those things. So it's a gritty business. And it also takes a lot of, one of the things we do is we provide CFOs on a project basis for one of our divisions. So I've got a great opportunity, and I've got the exclusive on it for 2 days. It's a 6-month project, monster deal my first few weeks. So I find somebody through a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend. I'm in Nashville, Tennessee. The project's in Lubbock, Texas, and this woman lives in St. Louis. So I've been around for a week. I don't have any of those usual accoutrements like a website or a real company. So I've got to talk to this girl about going to Lubbock, Texas from St. Louis on Monday from a company that she can't really reference. So I'm working with a client because I've referenced her by 6 other people. I know she's good. She goes, well, it sounds like a good opportunity, but I don't know. I mean, how do I just submit travel? Does your travel department take care of that? Like, yeah. I'm going to need you to put that on your credit card. You ever put my travel on my credit card? Yeah, if you don't mind, it'd be great. And she said, well, where is it? Lubbock, Texas. Okay, I need you to send me stuff. And I said, well, what's the dress? What's formal dress? I said, okay. Well, she says, I can make that work. It's formal dress. I don't know if I can still fit it in any of my clothes. Well, that's the only thing I had not done is met her face to face, which I usually do every other time since then, but she's referenced about 3 type clients. It's a little scary when she says, well, formal clothes, I don't know if I can still fit into any of my clothes, because it is consulting and appearance does matter. So I'm like, well, just make sure that you're professionally dressed. She's a beautiful woman, beautiful woman. So she ends up going to this client. Roxy Naroda is her name. She was the very first consultant put out for Vaco, and she's still a consultant today, 10 years later, and she's the founding mother of Vaco. It's just great that she had the ability to jump onto the entrepreneurial story because I was able to use the fact that we were dealing with a very long-term relationship with a client, and she paid for it herself, and she took off, and she was eventually paid. All of it. She was eventually paid. Another point about just the grittiness of it, we started in a shared services environment, which, or an office suites type place. It's me and the next person probably sold motorcycles. Somebody beside that sold airplanes. Somebody else sold insurance, right? So it's a conglomerate of companies that are there. So the reception answers the phone for everybody. Well, I deal with CFOs and controllers, and these guys are tight. They want things just so. And I'd worked for big companies prior to this. Well, I had a client call me. I won't tell you his name, but in the interest of acting like I know famous people, it was Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's a CFO of a company in Nashville. He calls me. He's looking for me, and he can't find me. At this point, I'd hired this guy, Bradley, this other guy named Elvis Presley. And Elvis Presley so Schwarzenegger can't find me, so he finally gets Elvis. And he says, I need to be able to talk to Jerry whenever I want to talk to him. I'm one of his largest clients. I've been a client of his for the last 12 years, and it's my expectation that the receptionist knows to connect me when I call. To which Elvis is a good old country boy, very smart, very honest, very open to what he does, says, oh, shoot, Mark, that receptionist answers the phone for 50 different people. We're just glad we get our name right. So it's not that I misled that I was part of an office suite, but it wasn't the image that I was trying to work through. Mark said, oh. But we were able to work through that. The next point, beyond the grittiness of it, also because it is so gritty, it's something to really think about when leaving the corporate world. I had a guy out of Texas, looked good getting off the bus, rock star, built out a $50 million organization for a competitor in Texas, $60 million for another one over the last 15 years. No-brainer hire. He didn't come from the same background I did, which is CPA, public accounting geek, right? but he had done so much in our space. How do you miss out on a guy like this? So we put him in there, and he'd been a corporate manager for so long. And although he had a lot of relationships, he hadn't actually used those relationships in a long time. He opened quickly Denver, San Antonio, Dallas, Austin, on his own, right? It's a different way to do business. I don't know everything. We're open to new ideas, right? He had done it so many times before, but he hadn't done it the way we did it. He did it from an administrative staffing perspective. So he opens all these people immediately, hires a ton of people, we invest a lot of money in it, and guess how many of them worked out? 0, thanks for the confidence, you're 100% right. 0 of those deals worked out because while other companies can do that, that's not what we do, right? We get pedigreed players like the players in this room that can have relationships with CFOs, CIOs, CEOs. We don't really do well leading from a traditional staffing arena. That was about a $4 million lesson, but we learned it and it was a bad fit. That doesn't make him a bad guy. He went to another mega conglomerate and he's done really, really well with that, but he didn't understand the gritting, and he also didn't have the relationships or the pace and intensity to succeed in an entrepreneurial environment. What we say is, you start out as a player, right? You're the player on the field, working it, and now you evolve into being a player coach, and maybe one day you're just a coach, but I haven't seen that yet. It's a matter of time. And we've grown from 0 to 190 million in revenues over the last 10 years from people who found a way to win. That people were willing to play in the gritty space and do what it took to be successful. There's another one. This is about somewhere between number 5 and 7. Stay coachable and curious. It's crazy that the more success we get over time, the less open people are to be honest when there are issues. And I'll tell you about a specific mistake we made along the way. This about year 5. We just opened maybe 15 offices at this time. And we needed some advertising collateral. So we got these great brochures, had an ad company come in, do these slicks for us. And they said, you know what you guys are? You guys are sharp, energetic people. So let's do an ad campaign around sharp, energetic people. I'm like, whatever, we're in a hurry, so just give us 1,000 of them. So we get a divisional brochures for all 4 of our divisions. The one for Vaco Resources, which is our CFOs and controllers on a project basis, you open it up and you can't read the copy because his face is so big, you don't want to break eye contact. It's humongous. So you're running through there trying to read it. It's just awful. So I would go from office to office at this point, but I was still in a hurry because I've got business to sell. So we order 1,000 of them, send it out to our offices. I go to Memphis. Memphis has that guy's face cut out and his eyeballs cut out on a popsicle stick. Welcome to Memphis, Jerry. Good to see you. I go to another one, and the woman from the staffing division, her face is there and her body is just laid out on the rest of it. They drawn on the rest of it. So what I learned there was, while it wasn't important to me, advertising is something that people have an emotional connection to. And while the words were good, the feel wasn't who we were. And it's important to other people, and we have to get people that'll come together in a decision like that because to protect and preserve what we are. We need to be more community driven around those type of decisions. And also be coachable enough to where we take that lesson and own it every day. Now people are less inclined to say what they really feel is wrong, and we have to really fight against that to make sure that happens, that we're open and honest about that. Did that make sense? So long would it go about it? The next point is, this is the biggest issue that I've faced in the last 2 years, in making sure that everyone understands that bigger can be better. That seems obvious, right? But in an entrepreneurial organization where you've lost 3 people that you wanted to keep, that's now grown to 350 internally and about 2,000 consultants, all those people there's a pride of that, right? We're all proud of what we've been able to build, and nobody wants to lose where we come from. So with every bit of a structure that we need to add as we grow, there's always a little bit of, oh, we're going corporate. Fun while it lasted. Going corporate, and especially when you're a firm that's prided itself on not going corporate. Well, the reality of it is that there are smart things to be done with a process that aren't going corporate, it's just doing good business. And what we like to tell is the story of Southwest. Who's ever flown Southwest before? Well, I think they have a pretty important job, like the way they get the planes off the ground. And I think it's really cool how they land them. So, it's a very important job, humongous with lots of regulations. They have somehow grown to a tremendous organization. Raise your hand if you think Southwest is still entrepreneurial. Ridiculous. They don't fly as much on this side, so they fly a ton out of Nashville. Within that process they get planes off the ground and down, which gets me on a plane and almost never late. The flight attendants have the freedom to make my day. The pilot has the freedom to make my day. Everybody has freedom within that process that's helped them grow so large to make my day. We were traveling around to all our offices a couple of weeks ago talking about this. We're on a plane and we're about 5 minutes late getting off because the gangway's not there. So this woman is a flight attendant, starts talking about telling jokes right there on Southwest. They'd just gotten a plane off the ground and on the ground. We're late. It turns out to be 20 minutes. Any other time I'd be angry. She's telling hilarious stories about how stupid guys are. So she jokes and jokes and jokes and jokes. Finally, they get the gangway over, and the pilot gets on. He says, "This is the pilot speaking. The gangway is cleared. We'll be able to board. We'll be able to deboard. We got a guy over here to take care of it." So the woman had been, that's just phenomenal. To counter that to, I flew another airline, Delta. Do you guys ever fly Delta? Does anybody have any ownership of Delta? Is Delta in the room? Because I could change it to United. So we're flying Delta. I get there at 7 o'clock in the morning. My flight leaves at 7 a.m. That means I got to get up at like 6:30. It's ridiculous. So I get to the airport at 7 o'clock. It's probably about 6, maybe it's 6:20. So I get there and the lady says, "Flight's delayed." Okay, well, thanks for the, I'm sorry. I said, "Well, why is it delayed?" She goes, "Well, if you know anything about planes, the flight was delayed, didn't get in until 11 o'clock, and it takes 9 hours to reload the plane with the pilots. They can't fly yet." So it's like pre-7, and she's giving me crap about it. And I said, "You know what Southwest would have done?" Which they love that. I said, "You could have called. Could have called. Southwest will call me and say, don't get up. Nobody's here. Nobody's here to fly on the plane to sleep." That's what Southwest would have done. But Delta didn't. Finally, we get on the plane. And this woman is also obviously very upset that she worked for Delta because she's bumping into people throughout. And my partner had left his iPad on till the last second. So he gets abused. She says, "You've got to turn that off. It's ridiculous to still have that on." So then she walks back and she gets mad about it again and says, "Don't you know that? Don't you travel?" To remind him of how stupid he is. I'm running out of time. I'm not going to get to all of them. So ultimately, he tried that with Southwest, who ultimately came back and said, "Hey, honey, you got to turn that off or we're going to put you in the patio." It was on the wing. So the whole concept being bigger is better with the right systems and processes and holding true to what really matters. I'm going to skip to my last one, which is there are thousands of reasons to fail as an entrepreneur. Thousands of reasons. The good players find the 2 or 3 ways to succeed. If somebody goes out into business, 9 out of 10 entrepreneurial ventures fail, and for good reason. I remember when Renee Fisher came on board. Our first office outside Nashville was in Richmond, Virginia. You can't get to Richmond from Nashville. You've got to take a boat to get there. So she comes on board, and she says, "I can't really do it." I said, "Congratulations, Fisher." She's pregnant. Entrepreneurial, very first year, no company behind her really, no website. She finds a way to win in her first year after getting sued. Then she builds a $20 million company, Renee Fisher, and has 3 children over 8 years because she found the 2 or 3 ways to be successful way before she had the tools to support that. And I would challenge you guys to look at your next opportunity in the exact same way. You're in the most entrepreneurial moment probably of your lives. You read the papers, and the papers say, "Man, you can't get a job." I think 8.9% unemployment. Of course you're not going to get a job. There's thousands of reasons why you can't do it. 8.9% unemployment's crazy. All the jobs are going overseas. Can't be successful. They're all going overseas. There's thousands of reasons not to be successful. Baby boomers are retiring. We're going to have to pay for that. These slackers, they are retiring. And if you read that, that's true. There's thousands of reasons why we can't be successful. I'm going to back you up on that right here. Flip the paradigm on that. As baby boomers are retiring, what does that leave? Ridiculous amount of leadership opportunities. Ridiculous amount. And if you want to take the job in a mega conglomerate, that's awesome. I did that for a while too, and those openings are going to be there. If you decide to leave there and be entrepreneurial, as those leaders leave those mega conglomerates, what's going to happen? It's going to provide ridiculous opportunity for people to start their own entrepreneurial companies and build that. So inside or outside, you're set for life. Number two, I'll be done like in 1 second, okay, or 2 minutes. Number two, can anyone, you have to ask the history department of Ole Miss on this, but I can't remember a time or ever reading about a time where you can build billions of dollars and be in your 20s and 30s. That's never happened before. West Coast billionaires, people that don't need to be like Henry Ford and have to have millions of dollars to start a factory. All these billionaires started just like you guys, in MBA programs right there in the room. Ridiculous amount of opportunity. And then globalization is a huge opportunity for us to make a difference there. It is happening. Hard work is back in vogue. I saw, who knows who Kohler is? Kohler, the company? Well, let me ask you another question. Who's ever used a public restroom, a friend's restroom, or a restroom in your own house? Okay, so then you know who Kohler is because they've got products throughout. He was expressing some regret that he had taken a lot of his jobs overseas. And it was a group of business owners. A guy from Germany raises his hand and says, you know, I hear you, but because you do that, it allows other standards of living to grow. And you don't need more than 2 cars like an American family does. So it takes a little shot on that. And then another guy from a company called The Knot. Have you guys ever heard of that company? Anybody who's going to get married knows it's an Asian guy who runs it. And he created it himself. And he raised his hand and he said, Mr. Kohler, I'd like to give you a different perspective on that. My grandparents were in a mud hut. They didn't have electricity, they didn't have clean water. Because you brought your factories there, they were able to get jobs there, and now they have running water and they have electricity. Now they're able to do some things, and I'm able to find my opportunity where I eventually started my own company in San Francisco called The Knot, and I've been successful. That's 2 generations later. So I don't know how I feel about that as a human. I love that everyone's taking care of it. As a greedy capitalist, I think 2 cars is not enough. So whatever the case is, just remember the world is globalizing. It's a baller's game, and it's up to everybody in this room to hustle and take what's available right there. That's it. Thank you very much. She said you can squeeze a lot of words into a small point. Any questions? That's a great point, and I've got a lot of stories on that, but I'll just tell one. The best story I've got on that, we had just hired a new CFO, and the CFO brought over an HR director, he brought over a payroll director, he brought over an entire team. So the second person I hired was Amy Kimberlin. She was my assistant. So they're having a party, and Todd's been there for a year, my CFO, and he'd brought over this entire team. Well, Amy was my girl. I hired her. She was there from the very beginning. So we're at this party, and she looks over at all the people that Todd brought on and said, wow, can you believe Todd's brought all these people? Man, if he were ever to go, he'd take all of us. I'm like, us? You're with me. He might get all the rest of those people. But the reality of it is the company had grown so much, I had to decide at what point I'm going to lead through I had made the leap from management by autonomy to management by neglect. And because I didn't have the time to put into her, she gravitated to somebody who could do it better when was able to grow the thing. So it is a change. The sooner we make that leap, the better. And I can't think of a single thing that I've turned over that hasn't done better once somebody else took over. That's how good I am. Anything else? Thank you, guys. Sorry I went over a little bit. Appreciate it.